Yo, listen, before we even get into what she posted, before we even get into the caption, before we even get into the timing, I need everybody watching to understand one thing very clearly. Clarissa Shields is not competing with Remy Ma in the ring. She is not competing with Remy Ma on a track. She is competing with Remy Ma for an identity that already belongs to somebody else, and she is losing that competition in real time on her own page, in her own captions, in her own photo shoots. And the wildest part is she thinks nobody is smart enough to notice. 3 days ago, Remy Ma sat down with Angie Martinez and gave a full sit-down interview built around one very specific phrase. Soft girl era. That was not a throwaway line. That was the entire thesis of the interview. That was the title on the video. That was the mood. That was the era Remy was announcing to the world. And exactly 72 hours later, not 7 days later, not 2 weeks later, 72 hours later, Clarissa Shields posts a full glam photo dump with a caption that includes the exact phrase real soft girl, tucked in the middle of it like a landmine she thought nobody would step on. This is not a coincidence. This is not two women arriving at the same vibe at the same time. This is the same pattern we have been documenting for months, and this time she left a fingerprint so obvious that even the people defending her cannot pretend they do not see it. And when we get to the industry breakdown later in this video, when I show you why this pattern is not just weird, but is actually damaging her entire brand, her entire fight promotion, and her entire relationship with the man she is supposedly building a life with, you're going to understand that what looks like a caption is actually a confession. She confessed on her own page. She just does not know it yet. Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit like, and subscribe. Let's get into it. Now let me set the table properly so nobody watching is missing any of the context, because this story does not start this week, and it does not start last month. This story has been building for over a year, and every chapter has made Clarissa Shields look worse than the chapter before it. For anybody just tuning into the saga, here's the map. Clarissa Shields is one of the most decorated female boxers in the history of the sport. That part is not up for debate. Two-time Olympic gold medalist. Undisputed champion in multiple weight classes. On paper, one of the greatest to ever do it. Remy Ma is a legendary New York rapper, a Bronx-bred lyricist, one half of one of the most publicly followed marriages in hip-hop through her relationship with Papoose, a love and hip-hop mainstay, and a woman whose entire aesthetic, whose entire tone, whose entire cultural signature has been imitated by female artists and personalities for the better part of 2 decades. Papoose is the rapper Remy was married to for years, the man who waited for her while she was incarcerated, the man who wrote love letters to her in public, the man whose image was built on being the loyal husband. And then somewhere along the line, that marriage ended and Papoose ended up in a relationship with Clarissa Shields. That is the surface story. That is what a casual observer would see. What a casual observer would not see, and what this video is going to lay out for you piece by piece, is that Clarissa Shields did not just end up dating Remy Ma's ex-husband. She has been systematically studying Remy Ma, copying Remy Ma's fashion, copying Remy Ma's hairstyles, copying Remy Ma's phrases, copying Remy Ma's poses, copying Remy Ma's cadence in interviews, and now, most recently, copying the exact language Remy used in a mainstream interview only 3 days before Clarissa deployed the same language on her own page. The stakes here are not just gossip. The stakes here are that Clarissa Shields has a fight coming up, a fight she needs to sell tickets for, a fight she needs media coverage for, and instead of the coverage being about her preparation, her opponent, her legacy, her skill, the coverage is about why she keeps dressing, talking, and posting like the woman her boyfriend used to be married to. That is a career problem. That is a promotion problem. That is a brand problem. And the deeper we go, the clearer it becomes that this is not accidental behavior. This is a pattern that has been documented so many times that we are past the point of giving her the benefit of the doubt. So the question this video is going to answer is not whether she is copying Remy. That is settled. The question is why she keeps doing it, what it says about the relationship she is in, and what it says about the identity she is quietly admitting she does not actually have. Let me walk you through the surface evidence first, because this is the layer that anybody with a phone and 10 free minutes can verify for themselves. Piece number 1. 3 days ago, Remy Ma posts a full sit-down interview with Angie Martinez. The video title on Angie's page reads word for word, Remy Ma on her soft girl era. Not a subtitle. Not a chapter marker. The main title. The thumbnail. The centerpiece of the entire conversation. Inside the interview, Remy uses the phrase soft girl era repeatedly. She talks about how she used to be the one taking out the garbage, hanging up pictures, opening her own car doors, being one of the guys, and how she is now stepping into a season of her life where she is being treated like a lady, where she is wearing floral rompers, where she is drinking Earl Grey tea, where she is choreographing dance routines for her performances, where she is dating again, where she is single, where she is soft, where she is letting a man be a gentleman. Angie Martinez feeds her the term. Remy embraces the term. The interview brands the term. It is everywhere. Piece number 2. 72 hours later, Clarissa Shields posts a photo carousel with a caption that reads, "And I want you to catch this word for word. Every chapter looks different. This one feels like the good life. Glow up era. Welcome to the good life. I could sit pretty now. Real soft girl. Good life, good views, good checks when I land. Real soft girl." She put it right there in the middle of the caption like she was trying to hide it in plain sight. Piece number 3. This is not the first time. This is not even the 10th time. Go back and look at the receipts. When Remy wore that specific shade of red in her hair, Clarissa suddenly went red. When Remy did a photo shoot in a pink fur coat with Papoose, Clarissa did a photo shoot in a pink fur coat with Papoose. When Remy's friend Juju wore a specific dress, Clarissa showed up in a cheaper knockoff version of that dress. Piece number 4. The horseback riding. Remy and Papoose famously rode horses together in Aruba, a moment that was documented on Love and Hip Hop, a moment fans still reference to this day. And then Clarissa and Papoose go to Aruba and do the same horseback ride. And piece number 5, because I said 4 and I am giving you 5, because this pattern is so deep I have to keep going. The New York accent. Clarissa Shields is not from New York. She is from Flint, Michigan. That is a matter of public record. And yet in recent videos she has started rolling her voice with a New York inflection, saying things like, "Watch how you talk to me," which just so happens to be the exact opening line of a Remy Ma track. That is not the way people from Flint talk. That is the way people from the Bronx talk. That is the way Remy talks. So what we have on the surface layer alone is at minimum 5 separate, verifiable, documented instances of Clarissa Shields adopting the aesthetic, the language, the wardrobe, the geography. And now the exact promotional phrasing of a woman she was once in the DMs of, a woman she blocked, a woman she publicly claims she does not follow, a woman whose songs she recently claimed on camera she does not even know. 5 pieces. And that is just the top layer. That is just what is visible without any inside information at all. And oh, do I have more? If you thought the surface evidence was damning, wait until you see what the culture has already been saying about this, because I am not the only one who has noticed. This is not one commentator with a theory. This is not one channel with a grudge. This is a documented, community-wide observation that has been building for months, and the receipts are stacked so high that even the Clarissa defenders in the comments section are running out of angles. Because here is the thing about pattern behavior. Once the culture identifies the pattern, every new instance is not a new story, it is a new confirmation. And what is coming next is confirmation on top of confirmation on top of confirmation, from voices you would not expect, in places you would not expect. And it paints a picture of a woman who has quietly become the running joke of the exact community she is trying to impress. Let me take you into the cultural layer now, because this is where the story stops being about one caption and starts being about a full-blown pattern that the hip-hop and boxing communities have both been openly discussing. Cultural evidence piece number 1. Remy Ma herself has already addressed this pattern in her music. On one of her recent tracks, she has a line where she says, and I am paraphrasing here because the exact bar is well documented, "Why you lying? I know I'm on their mood board." That line is not abstract. That line is not general. That line is a direct call-out aimed at the people who have been quietly copying her fits, her looks, her poses, her vibe, and everyone in the culture knew exactly who that line was aimed at the second they heard it. Remy did not have to say a name. The name was already in everybody's group chat. Cultural evidence piece number 2. The Ariel Helwani interview that dropped just yesterday. Clarissa sat down with one of the biggest interviewers in combat sports, and in the middle of a softball conversation about female rappers she loves, Helwani rattled off a list of names: Lil Kim, Foxy Brown, Eve, Cardi B, Megan Thee Stallion, Glorilla, Latto, and then he dropped in the Remy Ma question. And the entire energy of the interview shifted in half a second. Clarissa's whole face changed. The smile dropped. The laughter stopped. And she said, and I quote, "I don't know many of her songs, so I can't say that." Now let us pause on that for a second, because this is where the lie collapses under its own weight. You do not know Remy Ma's songs. You do not know Remy Ma's songs. But you know her hairstyles. You know her outfits. You know her interview phrases. You know her vacation destinations. You know her horseback riding trips. You know her fur coat colors. You know her floral romper aesthetic. You know her Angie Martinez interview well enough to lift a phrase from it 3 days after it aired. But you do not know her songs. Make it make sense. Cultural evidence piece number 3. Remy has already gone on record about how this relationship started. She has said publicly that Clarissa was in her DMs before any of this went down, asking for fashion advice, asking for styling tips, receiving whole photo threads of guidance from Remy herself. That is not speculation. That is not gossip. That is Remy on the record with her account of the origin story. And so the woman who was once studying at the feet of Remy Ma for style advice is now dating Remy Ma's ex-husband while wearing Remy Ma's outfits and quoting Remy Ma's interviews. Cultural evidence piece number 4. The community response. Go to the comments under Clarissa's post. Go to the quote tweets. Go to the reaction videos. Go to the Reddit threads. The consensus is not divided. The consensus is unified. The culture has already reached a verdict on this pattern, and the verdict is that Clarissa Shields is doing something that has crossed the line from flattery into something much stranger. And here is where I want to be fair, because credibility matters, so let me acknowledge the counterargument before I dismantle it. Somebody in the comments is going to say, well, soft girl era is a common phrase. It is a general aesthetic. Lots of women use it. And that is technically true. But here is why that defense does not survive contact with the evidence. It is not just the phrase. It is the phrase deployed 72 hours after Remy's interview branded it. It is the phrase on top of the pink fur. It is the phrase on top of the horseback ride. It is the phrase on top of the New York accent. It is the phrase on top of the hairstyle copies. It is the phrase as the latest data point in a pattern that already had 10 data points before this one. So no, this is not a coincidence. Coincidences do not stack like this. Coincidences do not repeat like this. Coincidences do not survive this level of scrutiny. And when you put every one of these pieces together, what you are looking at is not a woman who accidentally caught a vibe. What you are looking at is a woman who has been quietly building an identity out of another woman's leftovers, and the culture has finally, publicly, and unanimously called it what it is. Now here is where we shift gears completely, because up to this point we have been talking about aesthetics, we have been talking about captions, we have been talking about photo shoots, and if that was all this was, it would be a weird story, but ultimately a small one. But this is not a small story. Because when you zoom out from the caption and look at the actual business Clarissa Shields is running, and when you look at the actual business Papoose has built his entire career on, and when you look at the actual industry structure that determines who gets paid, who gets promoted, and who gets erased in both hip-hop and combat sports, you start to see that this Clarissa Remy Papoose triangle is not just a personal soap opera. It is a case study in what happens when a professional athlete builds her personal brand on top of somebody else's identity in the middle of a career that requires her to sell tickets on her own name. Let me walk you through the 3 systemic angles that make this so much bigger than one weird caption. Angle number 1. The promotion economy of women's boxing. Women's boxing is a sport that does not have the built-in fan infrastructure that men's boxing has. Every fight has to be sold on the personalities of the fighters involved, on the storylines, on the drama, on the reason why anybody should care. Clarissa Shields is the biggest name in women's boxing. Full stop. That is not up for debate. And yet every headline being generated about her right now is not about her upcoming fight, is not about her opponent, is not about her preparation, is not about her legacy. Every headline right now is about her copying Remy Ma. That is not a promotional strategy. That is a promotional disaster. Because the moment your personal drama becomes bigger than your professional product, the professional product stops selling. That is angle 1, and it is the angle that costs her real money every single week this pattern continues. Angle number 2. The Papoose problem. Papoose is signed to the same record label as Clarissa because Clarissa also raps or attempts to. He is a rapper who built his career on being the loyal husband of Remy Ma. That was his brand. That was his identity in the culture. That was the reason people rooted for him. And now that brand is completely dismantled because the loyal husband is no longer the loyal husband. But here is the industry piece that nobody is talking about. Papoose has not done a single track with Clarissa. Not one. Two artists on the same label, in a romantic relationship, and there has been zero musical collaboration. Now think about what that tells you about how Papoose actually views Clarissa's artistic potential. If he thought a track with her would help his career, he would have done it already. If he thought a track with her would help her career, he would have done it already. The absence of collaboration is not neutral. The absence of collaboration is a statement. And that statement is that Papoose, who built his career next to a legitimate rapper in Remy knows the difference between a legitimate rapper and someone who is being propped up by a promotional machine. Angle number 3, and this is the deepest one. The identity economy in modern hip-hop and modern celebrity. In today's media environment, an artist's identity is their most valuable asset. It is what gets them booked. It is what gets them streamed. It is what gets them endorsed. It is what gets them on magazine covers. And when an artist's identity is provably a copy of somebody else's identity, that asset collapses in value. The market, whether it is the streaming market, the endorsement market, the booking market, or the ticket market, does not reward duplication. It rewards originality. And this is why the pattern we have been documenting is not just a personal problem for Clarissa Shields. It is a structural problem. Because every time she copies Remy, she is not just embarrassing herself, she is systematically devaluing her own brand equity in an economy that only pays originals. And when you connect those three angles together, the promotion economy of women's boxing, the strategic silence of Papoose in the studio, and the identity economy of modern hip-hop, you start to see that this is not one woman with a weird crush on her boyfriend's ex-wife. This is one woman quietly liquidating her own market value in real time, on her own page, in her own captions, and in her own interviews, because she cannot resist the impulse to reach for an identity that was never hers to take. And here is the truth bomb that ties every single piece of this together, because when you strip away the captions and the outfits and the interviews and the horseback rides and the pink fur coats, what you are actually looking at is a woman who is, in my opinion and based on every piece of evidence documented so far, quietly aware that the man she is with is not with her for her. He is with her because she is the closest available replica of the woman he actually lost. And that right there is the most damaging thing anybody could say about a relationship, but the evidence is not subtle. It is not hidden. It is written into the pattern itself. Because a man who is truly in love with a new woman would encourage that new woman to develop her own identity. He would encourage her to find her own voice, her own style, her own aesthetic, her own signature. He would not sit next to her while she copies the hair color of his ex-wife. He would not accept the pink fur coat photo shoot with him in it, mirroring the exact photo shoot he did with his ex-wife. He would not go on a horseback ride in Aruba that mirrors the horseback ride he did with his ex-wife. He would not stay silent while she quotes his ex-wife's interviews on her own page 72 hours after those interviews air. Every one of those moments is a moment where he could have said something and he did not. And the silence is the evidence. Because what the silence tells you is that he is not with her. He is with the version of her that reminds him of the woman he used to be with. And Clarissa, whether she consciously understands this or not, has made herself into a living, breathing tribute act to the woman whose place she is trying to take. That is why she keeps copying. That is why the pattern will not stop. Because on some level she knows that the moment she becomes fully herself, she loses the only thing that is keeping this relationship in place. That is the trap. That is the truth bomb. And it is not a truth bomb I take any pleasure in delivering, because it is genuinely a sad thing to watch a decorated athlete, one of the greatest female boxers of all time, a two-time Olympic gold medalist, systematically dismantle her own individuality on the internet in front of millions of people because she is in a relationship that requires her to be a replica in order to survive. This is not just embarrassing. This is not just weird. This is, in my honest opinion, one of the most publicly documented cases of relationship-driven identity erosion I have ever seen in the culture. And the worst part is that Papoose, who lived through a real love story with a real woman with a real identity, is now sitting in the passenger seat of a knockoff version of that same story, watching it play out in captions and outfits and photo shoots, and saying nothing. Because saying something would break the illusion he is using to get through his day. That right there is the reveal. That is what this whole thing has been about. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. And here is what I want you to walk away with, because this story, as messy as it is, actually has a hero in it, and the hero is winning without even having to lift a finger. Remy Ma is not on the internet responding to Clarissa's captions. Remy Ma is not doing tit-for-tat photo shoots. Remy Ma is not showing up at Ariel Helwani interviews trying to reclaim her own vocabulary. Remy Ma is sitting down with Angie Martinez, one of the most respected voices in hip-hop, being brought into a conversation about a full new era of her life, being celebrated for her maturity, being cheered on for stepping into her softness after decades of being one of the toughest women in the genre, being praised for her new music, being teased for how good she looks in a floral romper, and being asked about her upcoming album, her upcoming tour, her upcoming performances with choreography and background dancers. That is the picture of a woman who is winning. That is the picture of a woman whose identity is so intact, so authentic, so hers, that other people are literally taking pieces of it and wearing them like accessories. And you know what Remy is doing about it? Making music, building her career, living her life, riding the wave of a legitimate glow-up that was earned through decades of work. One person is doing photo shoots trying to look like somebody else. The other person is being asked about her new album on the biggest platform in New York media. One person is copying phrases from an interview. The other person is the person the interview was built around. And that contrast right there is the entire story. The genuine article always wins. The copy always eventually gets exposed. And in this case, the copy is not just being exposed by one commentator. The copy is being exposed by the culture, by the community, by the receipts, by the timing, by the photo evidence, and now by her own caption. Remy did not have to do anything to win this. She just had to be herself. And that is the lesson in all of this. That is the resolution. Because when you are the real thing, the copies just make you look more valuable. Every time Clarissa reaches for another piece of Remy's identity, she is not diminishing Remy, she is confirming that Remy is the standard. She is confirming that Remy is the one worth copying. And the person who is worth copying is always, always, the person who wins in the long run. That is how this ends. That is how this always ends. And Remy Ma is going to be just fine, because she is exactly where she is supposed to be, doing exactly what she is supposed to be doing, on exactly the platform she is supposed to be on, and the noise around her is only making her signal stronger. Now this is only the start, and I want to be very specific about what is coming next. Because there are at least 2 developments in this story that are going to break wide open in the coming weeks, and you do not want to be caught up on the old chapter when the new one drops. Development 1. The Clarissa Shields fight promotion cycle is about to hit full gear, and every single interview she does between now and fight night is going to be scrutinized through the lens of this pattern. Every phrase she uses, every outfit she wears, every hairstyle she debuts, every song she quotes. And if she keeps doing what she has been doing, the promotional cycle for what should be the biggest fight of her career is going to be completely hijacked by the copycat conversation. That is a story I will be covering in real time because it is going to escalate. Development 2. The Papoose situation. There is a growing conversation in the culture about whether Papoose is going to eventually break his silence on this whole dynamic, or whether he is going to keep letting it play out on Clarissa's page. And whatever he does, whether he stays quiet or whether he finally speaks up, is going to reshape the entire narrative. So make sure you are subscribed, make sure you have notifications on, because when these 2 things break, and they will break, you want to hear it from me first, with the receipts, with the analysis, with the industry context, and with the full picture that nobody else is putting together. And speaking of the full picture, if you thought this Remy Clarissa breakdown was deep, wait until you see the next video I have coming, because I am about to walk you through the Ariel Helwani interview freestyle in full forensic detail, bar by bar, breath by breath, and I am going to show you why that freestyle was not just a bad freestyle. I am going to show you exactly why it may have been the single most career-damaging 30 seconds Clarissa Shields has ever put on tape, and why the reaction from the boxing world and the hip-hop world combined tells you everything you need to know about where her music career is actually headed. That video is coming up next. Click it as soon as this one ends, because once you see the breakdown, you will understand why I said what I said, and you will understand why the pattern we just discussed today is only chapter 1 of a much bigger story. We unpack. We unpack. We unpack. And I will see you in the next one.